Hi guys, and welcome back to Life with TKG Friends. So today we are going to be reacting to videos. Thanks.
Yes, yeah.
Starting up with
Riley appears in the movie Finding Dory. Did you know that Riley, yes, our beloved Riley, appears in the movie Finding Dory when Dory is at the Marine Life Institute? There's a school field trip happening, and if you look closely, you'll notice that one of the kids there is exactly Riley from Inside Out. And if you're done Riley with the shirt that says 86, he's wearing the same shirt at the aquarium. And that makes perfect sense, since in the movie, Dory leaves Australia and goes to California in Morro Bay, which is 233 miles from San Francisco, where Riley lives. So, Riley's school really did visit the institute where Dory was. This is just the first of the 20 Disney character appearances in movies that we're going to show. Stick with us until the end of the video and check it all out. We all know that birds can migrate long distances, even Disney. For this reason, the company decided to have the same bird that was in Red, which takes place in Canada, appear in the Doug series, faithful dog of Carl from Up, who lives in the United States. The episode is the one where Doug has his clashes with the squirrel. This series is really cool. In Toy Story, we find one of the most subtle and interesting references between Disney characters. When Woody helps Bonnie create Forky, her new toy, we can notice that in the same room as Bonnie, there's a girl wearing a lilac outfit in the background. Believe it or not, but that child is none other than Boo from Monsters, Inc., which means that Boo and Bonnie are classmates in kindergarten, and that probably the Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. universes are in the same dimension. In Red, we find another very, very cool reference. When Mai Li transforms into the giant red panda, she runs desperately through the hallways of her school. And along the way, she bumps into two students who were passing by and ends up knocking them over. Note that when the girl falls to the ground, we can see her face, and she's completely identical to Riley from It. Wanted to save some time and used Riley's design to speed up the production of the film. If you watched Lilo and Stitch or had an amazing childhood or just have a Disney Plus subscription, anyway, you probably didn't notice that in the scene where Lilo goes to the window to see the supposed shooting star, if we look at the corner of the window, we'll see a Dumbo plush. Dumbo is that little elephant who can fly using his ears, and he's one of the most famous characters from Disney's old films. So, it's a historical reference. In Chip 'n Dale, there's no shortage of references to other Disney movies and cartoons, and to mention all the characters, did a video just for that. So let's talk about the more.
okay guys, sorry about that. Let's continue the video.
Or subtle appearances in the movie. For example, in the scene where the two brothers are in the evidence room trying to solve the case of missing animations, we see some really cool items. For example, on top is Mr. Potato Head himself, or is it Mrs. Potato Head? Since it's not completely assembled, we can't say for sure, but it's definitely one of the two. In that same scene, in the evidence room, we can also see a really cool artifact, the top hat of Jiminy Cricket, who was Pinocchio's conscience in the classic film. Seriously, I never get tired of watching Disney movies. And you? And today, to honor the greatest animation and cartoon company in history that marked the childhood of millions of children, comment down below, #Disney. Talking about Red again, we see a very cool reference. Remember that boy from the school Mai Li had a huge crush on? Notice that the boy's shirt says Scapula. And of course, not by coincidence, that's the same name as the metal rock band we see performing in the Land of the Dead in Coco. So, they were probably a very famous rock band in the past, and the boy enjoys old rock music. In that same musical competition that happens in the Land of the Dead, we see another reference to a much older character. Notice that the somewhat emo skeleton playing several instruments alone is wearing a shirt with a picture of himself. With a skull. That's simply the same shirt that Sid, that wicked boy from Toy Story, wore in the franchise's first movie, which was enough for some fans to create the theory that the skeleton would be Sid himself in the afterlife. But honestly, we think it's just a reference, since he appears very briefly in Toy Story 3. Remember we talked about Boo appearing in Toy Story 4? Well, she appears more than once in the movie. In the scene where Buzz ends up getting stuck in one of the booths at the park, we see a little girl trying to knock down the rockets to be able to choose a prize. And despite hitting the rockets, they don't fall. When she looks at the park employee, we can see that it's the same girl who was in Bonnie's class. So it's really Boo again. Now, let's talk about two Disney movies that take place almost exclusively in the sea, Moana and The Little Mermaid. We all know that The Little Mermaid is one of Disney's greatest classics. Probably why the animators of Moana decided to pay a small tribute to one of the film's characters, Flounder. In the clip where Maui sings in the 2016 film, we briefly see Ariel's faithful friend appearing among the fish in the scene, which makes perfect sense. After all, mermaids rule the seas, plus the fact that the directors of Moana were the same ones who directed The Little Mermaid, Ron Clements and John Musker. A beautiful tribute. We also see in another film, also directed by the duo, the appearance of another very important character from The Little Mermaid. In Aladdin, a 1992 film, we see Sebastian, another friend of Ariel's and the court composer of King Triton. When the genie is reading the manual on how to turn someone into a Disney prince, Sebastian appears and pinches the genie's finger. But he's not the only character that the genie makes appear in the Aladdin movie, because before Sebastian appears, the being of cosmic and phenomenal powers simply turns into Pinocchio, just like in the 1940 Disney film. Of course, in the scene, he made a reference to the wooden puppet to call Aladdin a liar, but it was really cool to see this appearance of this historical character. If you made it this far, you surely enjoy animated movies and cartoons like us, so subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to not miss the next videos. Now talking about Soul, released in 2020, when Joe goes to shave and get a haircut, the barber talks about his daughter, and in the background, we can see a photo of the proud dad with his daughter. But what really catches the attention is the little doll she's holding, which is a rabbit just like the one that appears in Toy Story 4 and gets into conflict with Buzz. We just don't know if it's the same character or just a similar model. Aladdin's genie is not the only magical being from Disney who can change shape, because Maui can do it too after recovering his magical hook that was with Tamatoa. And when he's transforming into various beings, we briefly see him turn into Sven, Kristoff's reindeer, Anna's romantic partner from Frozen. This is definitely a very cool crossover reference. In Coco, we also find another very cool crossover reference. When Miguel is running through the fair in his town, he passes by a street where several dolls are hanging. If you pause the scene and look closely, you'll see that these dolls are plush versions of Buzz and Woody, the two protagonists of Toy Story. It seems that Disney really likes references involving the toy franchise, and I love it when it does. In the emotional final scene of Monsters, Inc., we see several references to characters and items from Disney and Pixar in Boo's room. For example, we can see Jessie on Boo's tea table as if Boo had played with her just before going to the world of monsters. In fact, Boo ends up giving the Toy Story cowgirl to Sullivan as if she wanted him to play with her. In addition to Jessie, we can also see the famous Pixar ball, which is the biggest Easter egg among all the company's films for sure. It's also another item that Boo hands to Sullivan in her innocence without knowing that they were there to say goodbye forever. Poor Boo. And to finish the sad scene from the Monsters movie, one of the Disney character toys that Boo gives to Sully is a rubber Nemo figurine, one of those that make noise when squeezed. And the detail is that the Nemo movie hadn't even been released yet, which only happened 2 years later, which indicates that Pixar was already working on it when Monsters, Inc. was released. Since we talked about Nemo, in Finding Nemo, in the waiting room, we see a boy reading a magazine while waiting for his turn to be served. If you look closely, you'll notice that on the cover is the old version of Mr. Incredible from The Incredibles. He was probably reading a retro comic book of Pixar heroes. I don't blame you, because I also enjoy old comics. Every time I watch Pixar and Disney movies, I'm always attentive to see if I can find references to other characters and Easter eggs, because it's certain that will appear. Really amazing video, sure you're watching. Watch both and then tell me which one you like the most. Thanks, and see you in the next video.